is on page 588. Take a look. 588. The Parsha Shemini. Third book of the Torah. The book is called Vayikra. Everyone has a copy? Who doesn't have a copy? Who needs a chumash? You need one? Okay, here you go. Page 588. Okay. So again, the third book of the Torah is Vayikra, called Leviticus in English. And the third parsha in the third book is called Shemini. The word Shemini is Hebrew for 8. And the parsha begins. It was on the 8th day, Moshe summoned Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. And he told Aaron, take yourself a young bull for a sin offering and a ram for an elevation offering, unblemished, and offer them before Hashem. And to the children of Israel, then he said, take a he-goat for sin offering, a calf and a sheep in their first year, unblemished, for an elevation offering. Everyone knows that the sin offering is for an atonement for a sin that a person's made inadvertently or by mistake. Even when you make a sin by mistake, you do have an obligation to bring an offering to Hashem, because persons are held responsible not to make mistakes. Though we understand mistakes, we don't justify mistakes. And that's what the policeman will tell you every time he catches you. Now, I know you didn't speed on purpose, but you get a ticket anyway. That's the way it is. So you have to pay your dues. The elevation offering is an offering that is purely goes up to Hashem. In Hebrew we call it olah, and it's burnt and totally, and no one eats from it at all, and from the animal. Why these sacrifices are being brought now on this 8th day of whatever? Is it the 8th day of Pesach, the 8th day of Hanukkah, the 8th day of the Bris Milah? What is the 8th day of? We don't know. But let's take a look anyway. So, then verse 4, another bull and a ram for peace offering. Oh, peace offering is very important. How many times have you offended somebody with a peace offering, right? So it's a peace offering to Hashem. Korban Shlomim, right? And a meal offering, that's a mincha. It's called a meal offering with oil, mixed with oil and flour, because today Hashem appears to you. So in order to understand this, you have to know what today is, and why is Hashem appearing to us. So let's understand, of course, that Hashem, of course, is always there in the world, every minute, every day, every place, with us all the time, wherever we go. But his appearance is a sort of a little more than just him being with us. He makes an appearance. To make an appearance, Hashem make an appearance. So we understand the appearance to mean that a sense of the divine presence, which in Hebrew we call the Shekhinah, is going to come down to earth. That means that at a certain time, at a certain event, that you feel a certain closeness to Hashem more than any other time, more than other times. Certainly, one would agree that if you're standing under the chuppah with your, I'm busy. I'm busy. Okay, sorry. You understand that standing under the chuppah with your husband, your chassan, or your kala, the wife, you feel the divine presence of Hashem is coming to bless the couple. It's a big moment in a person's life. I mean, you're standing in front of Hashem, holding your brand new baby, 8 days old at the bris, and you feel the divine presence. It's a great moment in your life. There are great moments in person's lives which you feel the Shekhinah. Then, of course, there's great moments for not just individuals and individual moments, but also for the whole group, for all of the Jewish people. You would agree that Yom Kippur is a time when you feel Hashem so much more powerfully than other times. I've often found personally, in my experience, that a lot of people who aren't that religiously observant have a difficulty with the notion that Hashem appears on these occasions, as if to suggest, well, I can access Hashem anytime I want. And that's partially true, not completely true. It's partially true to the extent where a person praying very intensively, even on his or her own, maybe in great distress or great need, could in fact connect very closely with Hashem. But it is to suggest, in addition, that at certain times the access is there so accessibly that it doesn't even need that much intensity. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't daven with intensity. It doesn't mean you shouldn't completely pray and immerse yourself and devote yourself, and that you should push yourself. Of course you should. But certain moments that are special in persons' lives may be, like I say, on a general level, on a personal level, in which Hashem makes himself present. We say that Hashem is present and you feel him during the month of Elul, the month before Rosh Hashanah, the month before Judgment. Hashem knows that you want to return to him, to prepare for the day of Judgment, you want to improve your character, become better. He makes himself more accessible to you. What's happening here? That Hashem is appearing, that you can actually feel and sense the power of his presence. Would you all agree that on the day that Hashem gave the Torah in Mount Sinai on the holiday of Shavuos, and he revealed himself and uttered the 10 statements, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, the Lord your God, that everybody sensed Hashem's voice? I can't tell you how it was heard, it wasn't recorded, there wasn't any CDs in those days or whatever, but everyone testifies. I mean, the Torah testifies that everyone heard it. Everyone heard the voice. No one's disputed it. They heard the voice of Hashem. You have to believe that the divine presence is coming upon you, that Hashem's making an appearance. Now, of course, a complete appearance is impossible, because if it would have happened, we would all die. Because the divine presence is so powerful that it would completely consume the human. The difference, the vast gap between the divine presence and us is the gap between he who is almighty or powerful, in need of nothing, to us who are constantly needy of everything. The needy is overpowered by the unneedy. And that makes sense. I mean, he who is needy needs all sorts of fulfillment. One who's not needy needs nothing. Total control cannot become overcome by the needy. But the needy can become overcome by the unneedy. And Hashem, who's not needy, in need of nothing, he overwhelms us to the extent at the time of Har Sinai, when God did give the Torah of himself, after the first 2 statements, I am the Lord, you shall have no other, we all died. That's historically recorded by the Medrash. How did the Medrash know this? So the Medrash says, and we've taught this is something that some of you may know, is that at the end of the Torah, the last Parsha of the 5th book, when Moses says goodbye to his people and dies, Moshe says, the Pasuk, he writes it in the Torah, it says, Torah tziva lanu Moshe, Torah was commanded to us by Moshe. If we look at the word Torah, and we use the numerical values of the letters, which the Gematria, come up with the word number 611. That's to suggest that the first 2 statements, first 2 mitzvahs of the world, of the Torah, I am the Lord, you shall believe in me, you shall have no other, you're not allowed to believe in anything else, was heard by us. Everything else Moshe Rabbeinu taught us. We trusted Moshe Rabbeinu because he remained himself loyal to those first two statements. Anybody who comes up and tries to become our leader and is disloyal to those first two statements, well, we don't trust him. So some guy gets up and says, well, yeah, there's God, but I'm his son or I'm his partner, and there is something else besides, some other power besides God, the Father, the Son, and whatever else. Well, he's just not valid because he's not telling the truth, because he's not loyal to the first two statements. And we heard the first two statements, so we know that's true. There is no other God.
Even if that guy does a miracle.
Right? Even if that guy does a miracle, that's correct. How he got the power to do that's a separate story. But even if he did, and there are a lot of people that can make a lot of funny things going on. But the point is that we heard those first two statements, we died. Hashem brought us back to life in a great miracle, and we said we're afraid for any more. We asked Moshe Rabbeinu to teach us the rest. That means the other 8 statements of the 10 statements, the 10 commandments, plus the other rest of the mitzvahs, all Moshe taught us. He taught us 611 out of the 613. Okay, so at that moment you can imagine the overwhelming sense of God's presence. What we're saying here in this parsha is on this particular 8th day of whatever, Hashem made an appearance. Was it as powerful as the appearance at Mount Sinai? Maybe. Can't say for sure. Maybe it was more, maybe it was less. I can't be sure. Maybe we'll figure it out as we go through the parsha. But clearly, an appearance is made. Clearly, Hashem, His presence is sensed and felt. Okay, let's go further. For those of you that came in, please share with someone else the text. Okay, verse 5. They took what Moshe had commanded in front of the tent of meeting, and the entire assembly approached and stood before Hashem. That means everybody's there. Moshe's talking to Aaron and his sons and to everybody. And of course, Aaron and his sons are selected because they're the Kohanim, they're the priests, they're going to do the service, they're going to bring the sacrifices, but everybody else got to be there and watch at the same time. For that matter, watching is an important participation. As a matter of point of reference, when a mitzvah is to be done, and let's say you're not called upon to do it, it was someone else's. It was someone more qualified, for instance, or whatever. Or for whatever reason he's called upon, that doesn't mean you're exempt or not part of it. Your part is to be there and stand there and watch it and be part of it. It's not always necessary to be the star. You can be part of the audience as well and still get a credit for the mitzvah. Cohen gets up and is authorized to bless the Jewish people. So he gets up and he blesses the Jews. Right? And every prayer service in Israel, on holidays outside of Israel. And he does this great mitzvah. The mitzvah is to bless the Jewish people. And he's so authorized to do so. Now, I'm not a Kohen. I can't do this mitzvah. The answer is no, that's not true. You can do the mitzvah by being in the audience and being blessed. Being blessed. My job is to get blessed. And that's a job too, that you have to participate in and be part of. In any event, everyone is there. Okay, so verse 7, and in verse 6, this is the thing that Hashem has commanded you to do. Follow me inside. The glory of Hashem once again will appear. Hashem's making his appearance. Verse 7, Moshe said to Aaron, come near to the altar and before the service, sin offering, elevation offering, and provide atonement for yourself. The atonement, obviously, because of the what is for what? That's the sin offering. What's the atonement for? Well, let's suggest the Jewish people still have what to atone for in terms of the sin of the golden calf that had been done earlier. And Aaron, for one, would probably be sure to need that atonement because he was one to build it or put it together. In any event, so that's one offering. And then, of course, the elevation offering, provide atonement for yourself, for the people, perform the service of the people's offering, provide atonement for them as well as Hashem is commanded. And Aaron did what he wanted, what he was supposed to do in verse 8, as you can see it, and so forth. And the whole procedure is described on the next page. And then you go to the bottom of the page, verse 22, as Aaron finishes the service and does all the details that we're supposed to do, Aaron raises his hands. It's very important to raise your hands and bless the people. If you take a look at the Hebrew, 5 lines up, 6 lines up from the bottom, it says, Vayisa Aaron Yadav. Aaron picks up his hands. Blessing is in the hands. Blessing is in the hands. You all know that the special way the Kohen holds his hands, right? Because you might think this is famous because of Dr. Spock, but he got it from the Kohen. Okay? So now, Aaron lifts up his hands toward the people. He blesses them. He comes down from performing the offerings. Moshe and Aaron came to the tent of meeting. They went out and they blessed the people. Moshe joined, by the way. It was an interesting thing, he joined. Now, again, we said that Aaron has this job as the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. He does all these services. We all watch. He's our representative. And a special mitzvah for the Kohen is also to bless the people. He's got the koach, the bracha in his hands. As he elevates his hands over the people and makes the bracha. Nowadays, if you come to the shul, you're not supposed to look. It's the kind of thing that's become part of Jewish tradition. It's really basically you're not supposed to look at him because you're not supposed to distract him. So in fact, he doesn't look at us either. In fact, what he does, he takes his talit, his talis, and he pours it over, he raises it over his head halfway. Usually the talis is worn just a bit over here and the rest in the back. He brings it up halfway and holds his hands over the talis like this, waving and saying the bracha. And in so doing, he does so he doesn't see us. And we don't see him. We're supposed to cover our face with the talis as well. And the reason is simply we don't want to distract anybody. We've got to hear these words. The words are very important. They need to be heard. There are 15 words. Yivarech Hashem Yishmerecha, and so forth and so on. God bless you, keep you, protect you, show light upon your face to give you charm and favor and give you a special bracha of shalom, of peace. If you are privileged to be in Eretz Yisrael, so if you went to the shul, so you saw it. I mean, you heard it. Yeah, of course, right? You run them every day. Here we only do it holidays. Why is that so? So that's a special. I don't want to digress into something that's not really pertinent to our conversation, but basically the reason is because when you bless somebody, you have to be in good spirits. You have to be b'simcha. Why? Because the Gemara says, "Ein hashchina shora ela mitoch simcha." The Shechina, the divine presence of Hashem, will never come to anyone who's not in happiness and in a happy state. If you're in a sad, morose, depressed state, you cannot connect with Hashem. So if he's going to connect with Hashem, to bring the bracha from Hashem down to you, he's got to be happy. Generally speaking, persons that are in Eretz Yisrael are happy. You're in your homeland. When you're outside of Israel, well, you just don't have the same happiness. I don't want to say it downright miserable, but though some of us might be, but clearly the real sense of happiness is when you're at home. We're visitors. We're in the galut. We're in the exile. But the one thing that overrides the exile is holidays. Because it says in the Torah, "V'samachta b'chagecha," rejoice on your holiday. So therefore, there's simcha on the holiday, even in the galut, even in the exile, in the chutz la'aretz. That's why we have the Berat Kohanim. The Kohanim bless on holidays. Okay.
What about Shabbat?
What?
It's not included.
Oh, so that's a good question about Shabbat. Yeah. So some say that Shabbat is a happy day, that you should do Berat Kohanim. A lot of Sephardic communities do that. Generally speaking, in the Ashkenaz, we don't do it, and the reason is because Shabbat is not really called Simcha. Shabbat is called Omer, and that's an important distinction for everyone to know. It's another piece of important information. Again, not germane to our conversation, but important to know. The difference between Shabbat and holidays. Shabbat is a time of pleasure, Omer. Holidays are a time of Simcha, joy. What's the difference? The joy is out of an episode, out of a moment. The pleasure is a certain tranquility that is more constant. Shabbat is every week, every weekend. Holidays come once a year, whichever holiday it may be. Holiday is time for happiness, for simcha. But Shabbat is higher than that, in a way. Shabbat has oneg, which is a greater level of rest and a greater level of higher than joy. It's kind of pleasure. In any event, so Aaron made the bracha, and this is the conclusion of the event, of his service. Look at the bottom of page 591, verse 24, and there you see Hashem. There's Hashem. There's the appearance right there. 591, the bottom, 24. A fire came forth from before Hashem. We looked up and a fire came out of the heavens and consumed upon the altar the elevation offering and the fats. In other words, the offering that was on the mizbeach, on the altar, was completely consumed by that fire. The people saw it, they sang, and they fell upon their faces. They sang out of rejoicing, but they fell upon their faces because why? Because out of the fear of the divine presence. They know what the divine presence can do to you. So they got frightened, and again, did not look. Some want to say, and that's the reason why you don't look at the Kohen either. Because maybe the Kohen has Hashem's divine presence on his fingertips, as he's giving you the bracha. And therefore, you shouldn't look. How many people have ever seen the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark? Nobody?
Don't look, Miriam.
Well, in any event, I guess it's lost then. The whole story is lost. But the story is it's a fictitious parable of a explorer or a person who likes to go into exotic places and undertake all sort of exotic tasks filled with all sorts of adventure and shooting and killing, which Hollywood loves to do. And in the meantime, while all that is happening, so they're looking for what is called the Lost Ark. The Lost Ark is the ark that is supposed to have contained the cherubim, and the ark that was supposed to contain that contains the divine presence of Hashem. The Nazis are after it. Harrison Ford gets it, and then they capture Harrison Ford, and don't bother to see the movie. Anyway, I mean, I'm telling you the whole thing already. Anyway, at the end of the movie, they capture the ark. The Nazi's excited. He's all exalted. He can't wait to open it, right? And Harrison Ford, according to the scriptwriter, who had some sort of intelligence, said, "Don't look." He obviously tells the girl, because there was always a girl in the movie. He tells the girl not to look. Meanwhile, the Nazi does, and the Nazi disintegrates, which is a great scene. No, it's a beautiful scene. I mean, it's just beautiful. I stood up in the movie house and clapped. The truth is that the scriptwriter had got it right. Maybe by mistake or whatever. Through no fault of his own, he got it right. The fact of the matter is, you come too close to the Shekhinah, and you're dead. So the people here saw the fire come out of the heavens, and they saw this momentous moment of the sacrifice being consumed. And of course, having known what happened back at Mount Sinai when they all died, they fall to the floor. They're singing, they're rejoicing, simcha, but it's also a scary moment as well. Anybody can tell me a story, a similar story, of a single individual that also came that close to the Shekhinah and was so overwhelmed with fear that he fell on his face and refused to look? Who can tell me of such a story?
Can you repeat it? Sorry.
A story of an individual that had a similar real connection with Hashem, and or the divine presence is appearing to him, and he falls on the floor in fear. Moshe at the bush. Not the George Bush, the burning bush. You're making mistakes. Moshe at the bush. What does Moshe do? He falls on the floor. He hides his face. Because of such fear, and Moshe Rabbeinu didn't understand much, mind you. Moshe Rabbeinu, what was he at the time? He was a shepherd for his father-in-law Yitro. He ran away from Mitzrayim. And God's coming to tell him to take this position, to come and take the Jews out of Mitzrayim. He knows nothing about God, nothing about anything, but he sees a bush burning and not consumed, and he says, this is an amazing thing, I gotta figure this out, and he comes close. Hashem sees him come close and appears to him and says, Moshe, Moshe, and he hears the voice of God. How many of us have ever heard the voice of God? Not a large one. Not a thunderous one. I am the Lord your God. No, not that one. How about a soft voice, an inner voice?
Can your conscience be that
Maybe,
voice?
maybe. Have you ever heard it? Have you ever heard God tell you what he wants you to do and what he doesn't want you to do? Maybe you're not paying attention. Maybe you need to turn the volume up. Huh? And find out what he's saying. But we all have moments where Hashem appears, depending upon our level. If our level is one level of true receptivity and true humbleness and true anxiousness to really hear the word of God, we'll hear it. Moshe was really interested. You see, because when Moshe saw the bush, and he saw that it was fiery but not burned down, he was curious. Now, he wasn't the only one to see the bush, because he wasn't the only shepherd out there. All the shepherds were out there with their flocks, and they all saw this bush. But you know what? They were all busy. Well, I really like to look at this interesting phenomenon. It's almost as fantastic as Six Flags and Magic Mountain, you know. It's really phenomenal. It's like Universal Studios or something. I gotta go see this thing. But I'm busy. I got a job. I got activities. I got a family. I got a school. I got a girlfriend. I got a midterm. I got a final. I gotta make money. I got a client coming. I mean, real stupid, mundane stuff, you know. Moshe Rabbeinu says, I'm ready to drop everything I want to hear and find out what this phenomenon is all about. Because that's the secret of the universe. And everybody in his life will have that moment where the secret of the universe will be revealed to him, and you got to make that choice. Are you too busy? Are you too busy? Or do you want to find out the mysteries of the world and discover God? So Moshe Rabbeinu goes forth. Hashem sees this and says, wow, that's his calling. This man's got what it takes. He's going to be my leader. He's going to take the Jews out of Mitzrayim. So he reveals himself. And Moshe, uneducated, uninitiated, totally unaware of what all this is all about, senses the presence of God, whomever he may be, whom we don't know, whom I don't know. But Moshe falls on the floor, covers his face. The sense that there is a greater power on this earth and over the earth. That's a tremendous sense of experience. You gotta be jealous of a man that has that experience. And the fact is, Moshe has it. But Moshe responds properly because he's got good instincts. He knows what to do at the moment. He knows to fall on the floor. He knows not to look. Smart. Because he's got good instincts. He's got an instinct that senses the power of the divine presence. In any event, so that's what happened. And this is the moment here that happened to all of the Jewish people. Now we gotta figure out what this moment is. I mean, it's a great moment, great story, great event, and it's an event that's taking place after the giving of the Torah, and certainly has a recollection or some sort of similarity to the moment of the giving of the Torah. In any event, let's go back and figure this out. Back to 589 on the 8th day. The 8th day of what? That's the problem. The 8th day of what? What is this 8th day? What is this moment? It's the 8th day of Hanukkah, the 8th day of the Bris, the 8th day of Pesach, the 8th day of Sukkot. What is this? What 8th day of what? Where's the first 7?
In the previous Parsha.
Someone's thinking. She's not only a producer and a director, she also does you leave it to Jess. Jess knows what to say, what to do. Let's go back to the previous Parsha. Go back to page, let's see here. Let's go back to page 581. Hashem speaks to Moshe, telling him, take Aaron and his sons once again, and the garments, and the oil of anointment, and the offerings, the ram, the bull, the rams, and a basket of matzahs. Gather the entire assembly together, and everybody comes together, and the assembly is gathered, and Moshe says, this is what Hashem wants to be done. Bottom of the page. Moshe tells Aaron and his sons to come forward, and he immerses them in the water in the mikveh, and they put on their clothes, their special garments, on page 583, the top, right? And if you look at the 5 lines down, verse 10, Moshe takes the oil of anointment and anoints the tabernacle. What's the tabernacle? The Mishkan, the sanctuary that they built right after the giving of the Torah. Of course, the tragedy was that after the giving of the Torah, there was the sin of the golden calf. So the sin of the golden calf was finished, and we all atoned for it, and then we began to build the Mishkan right after Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur was the atonement, and then we started to build the Mishkan. And we're building this Mishkan, and when you're taking the oil of anointing and you're anointing it, what does that tell you about the Mishkan? What does that tell you about the tabernacle? To sanctify it, as it says in verse 10, and to anoint it, and to sprinkle upon it from it 7 times upon the altar. What does it tell you about the Mishkan? It tells you that the building is over. We've done it. We're done. We completed it. Now, it took quite some time, about 2 months actually. But then, after those 2 months, we had a delay for about 3 months. Tevish, Shvat, Adar, 3 months, right? And towards the end of that 3rd month, we were ready now to do an official dedication, inauguration ceremony for this beautiful, beautiful structure called the Mishkan. So we looked at it, and we're ready to do it. And they had all these things they were taken care of, as you can see. And turn to page to 585, the bottom. Moshe tells Aaron to his sons, cook the flesh at the entrance of the tent. Therefore you shall eat it, and the bread in the basket, inauguration of the inauguration offerings. This is the inauguration day, opening day. A little more serious than opening day at the ballpark. This is the first day of the Mishkan. You know, it's a great day. It's a great moment. It's a great celebration. When you build this beautiful building, I remember when we built this building some 22 years ago. What a celebration we had. Shul, the synagogue, the Knesset. Wow, we were all delighted. We sang, we danced, we brought the Torah, we watched the Torah. And they did that then too. The whole idea of the Mishkan, of all of its kalim, of all of its different vessels, was to have an ark in front and a Torah in that ark. And so, we all came, and it says at the bottom of the page, verse 33, you shall not leave the entrance of the tent of the meeting for 7 days, until the days when your days of inauguration are completed, for you shall be inaugurated for 7 days. What we're going to learn is that these 7 days were not opening day at all. That 7 days had to precede opening day. In other words, you had to have 7 preparatory days where you inaugurate things, you get things going, you turn things on, open the switches, you start making sure the plumbing works, the electricity works, this works, that works, everything's going on. Oh, when are we ready to open the doors? You need 7 days to make sure everything is working and clicking before we open the doors to the public. You understand? Okay, turn the page. 587. And he did so on this day. Hashem commanded to be done to provide atonement for you. At the entrance of the tent of the meeting, you shall dwell day and night for 7 days, and you shall protect Hashem's charge, and you will not die, for so have I been commanded. Aaron and his son carried out all the matters Hashem commanded. Turn the page to our Parsha, starting on Parsha Shemini 589. It was on the 8th day, 7 days after the 7 days completed, that Moshe summoned Aaron and his sons and said, this is opening day. This is when it's open to the public. This is when we're going to make the big celebration. So now we understand. It's the 8th day to the first 7. The question is, when did this all occur? So let's go back and understand. When we left Mitzrayim on Pesach, we marched 7 weeks, counting the Omer, to get the Torah at Mount Sinai. When we received the Torah, we waited 40 days for Moshe to come down to teach us the Torah, because Moshe went up for 40 days to learn it. When Moshe came down, he saw the tragedy of the golden calf, broke the tablets, and went up a second time to ask God for forgiveness. God forgave the people, gave them another chance. He said, come up another 40 days and come down with a new set of tablets that you broke the first ones. Everyone following the story so far? He came down Yom Kippur. So understand, all this period of time is elapsing from Pesach to Yom Kippur. Leaving Mitzrayim, marching through the desert, getting the Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu's 40 days up there, breaking the tablets, golden calf, all the way down to the moment of Yom Kippur, the end of the last 40-day segment, and the end of the atonement moment Hashem's forgiven us. Okay. 5 days after Yom Kippur, we started building the Mishkan. Nowadays, 5 days after Yom Kippur, you build what? The Sukkah, which is similar to the Mishkan. Okay. So we built the Mishkan, and the building lasted until Hanukkah. By the time Hanukkah came, there was no Hanukkah at the time, obviously. Hanukkah came years and years and years later. But about the same date as Hanukkah would become in the future, that's when we finished the Mishkan. Okay? Now, we have 3 months between now and Pesach. That's the next Pesach coming, which will be the first anniversary of our freedom from Egypt. So we waited those 3 months, and we got to the month of Nisan. Now Nisan is the month of Pesach, right? Pesach's on the 15th of Nisan. Hashem said the opening day of the Mishkan will be on the beginning of Nisan. So that means that 7 days before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, we will do what? We will have those preparatory days to work on. So that the 8th day would coincide with Rosh Chodesh Nisan. This 8th day that Torah is referring to is the beginning of the month of Nisan. And it's called the 8th day. And I've always had a question about it, and it doesn't make any sense. If you have 7 days of preparation, and then you have the first day of its inauguration, that first day shouldn't be called the 8th day. It should be called the first. It has nothing to do with the 7 preparatory days. Yes, you need 7 days to prepare, I agree. But after that, the next day is so totally different. Those 7 days were 7 days of practice, shall we say. This is the real thing. This is the real thing. The first day of Nisan. How can you compare and connect that first day of Nisan to the previous 7 days and call the first day of Nisan the 8th day, as if it's a continuum of the last 7 days. It makes no sense. It makes no sense at all. You know,
But you always talk about the significance of day
right. But I guess we're gonna find a significance to it. So let's figure this out. Okay. I want you to take a new job. I'd like to hire you next Monday. Okay. But I want you to come in 7 days beforehand and practice doing the job. And then on the 8th day, you'll start. That doesn't make any sense. Those 7 days are practice days. You're not getting paid for that. Now the first day comes of the job. It's not the 8th to the first 7. It's the first of its own. This is the first day I'm getting paid. This is the first day of my job. It's nothing to do with the first 7. You can't call it the 8th day as if the 7 days are continuing into the 8th. It's not. The 7 days are over. Practice is over. Now I'm getting paid. It should not have been called the 8th day. And that's the point that I'm raising of why we have to learn something special out of this. Or something special has to be learned from this. Why is it called the 8th day? But in order to understand what I'm going to say is perhaps a good answer, you need to appreciate the value, the power of the question. Is the question valid? Is the question valid enough to keep you up tonight? Well, if it is, I'll see you. I don't want anybody sleeping tonight. Why are you thinking about this? This makes no sense. Now, all the commentaries do talk about it. Rashi talks about it. Others talk about it. And there's no question that and you can look at the Rashi, the first Rashi, I don't know if he brings it down. They don't bring it down in English, but Rashi brings it in the Hebrew right away. The Rashi says it's the 8th day of the 7 days of preparation, which is in fact Rosh Chodesh Nisan. That's the day the Mishkan opened up and started, and that's really what the day is. And again, it doesn't make sense to me why you would do that. There are 14 days to prepare get rid of your chametz, prepare for Pesach. On the 15th day, it's Pesach. You don't call it the 15th day, you call it the first day of Pesach. You don't connect with the 14 days of cleaning out the chametz. Two separate entities. You don't call this the 8th day, you call it the first. The first day it's open, that's what you should be calling it. And that's the point of the question. Suggest the following answer as a point of leading us to a great and even deeper understanding of what's really happening here. Medrash wants to say that it's the 8th day since creation. Everybody knows creation took 7 days, right? What does it mean 8th day since creation? It means that since creation happened, from day 1 through day 7, everything else that has happened since will all be, it's all small and insignificant in comparison to this 8th day. Huh? Right. In other words, the whole purpose of creation was today. God created the heaven and earth on the first day, and the light, and the second day the heavens, and the third day the dry land, and the fourth day the sun and the moon and the stars, the fifth day the birds and the fish, and the sixth day the animals and the human beings, the 7th day Shabbos, and the 8th day the Mishkan. And everything else between the 7th and the 8th day is not as important as those 7 days plus this 8th day. We were waiting all of creation just for this one day. That means that all the stories that took place up until now do not have as much power as this 8th day in understanding why the world was created. The world wasn't created for Noach, for Adam and Chava, for the Garden of Eden, for the flood, for Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, for the Joseph, for the Jews in Mitzrayim, for the departure from Mitzrayim, for the Moshe Rabbeinu, for the giving of the Torah. All that is secondary to what happened here today. Today is the 8th day since creation. Everything else is just waiting for this 8th day. You're in your last year of college, and you start the first day of the semester, and every day a little bit further to the graduation. And if you think about it, all the days in between don't have the power that the first day had and the graduation day had. Everything else is in between. Everything else that's happened up until now is in between creation and today. Even the event of the giving of the Torah is secondary to this day. To this day. So now we talk about the appearance of God. Maybe the appearance of God here is even stronger than it was at Mount Sinai. But one thing's for sure, the people knew not to look. They knew that. They were going to die again. So they all fell to the floor. The point is that what is special about the Mishkan? What's special about the Mishkan, you see, is that it's the constant presence of Hashem. Hashem's presence will be felt on this day of sacrifice and inauguration and simcha and sense of God's presence, and the fire will come down from the heaven and consume the ark and consume the sacrifice. But the Shekhinah will stay here forever. At the time of the giving of the Torah, the Shekhinah came down to Mount Sinai, revealed himself to the Jewish people, gave us the Torah, and left. Left us with the Torah, which was pretty nice. Because I wanted God to come back and leave us with nothing, right? Left us with the Torah. But what was beautiful is that Hashem said, how are you going to take care of the Torah? Where are you going to put it? Where are you going to protect it? And the answer is in this new structure called the Shekhinah, called the Mishkan. And in the Mishkan will reside the Shekhinah. But if you think about it, the word Mishkan and Shekhinah sound the same. Mishkan, Shekhinah, it's the same letters. So I talked about it about 2 months ago when we learned about the construction of the Mishkan, and we talked about putting in all the different vessels of the Mishkan, the table, and the altar, and the ramp, and the inner holy of holies, and the ark, and the this and the that, and all these wonderful things. Well, we forgot one thing. We didn't wire the electricity. I mean, imagine this beautiful building, look how beautiful, right? Imagine for one moment. What made that happen? You know what made that happen? What made that happen? The Torah. We brought the Torah into the Mishkan. And now, the Torah which God left with us is activates the entire structure, and activates the divine presence of Hashem to remain on this earth forever. So then now we can understand that Hashem's accessible to us. Because the divine presence is here all the time. It's there. So of course, you have to be at a very holy level to be here all the time. I mean, the Kohanim come every day. It would be very holy to come every day. I mean, I tell people, for instance, come to the minyan every day. Oh, I'm not holy enough to come to the minyan every day, So get holy. I mean, I can't come every day. I mean, can you imagine coming every day to the shul and go nuts? Out of your mind, right? That's what they're supposed to be doing. Right? Fact of the matter is that you want Hashem with you every day? You gotta be with Hashem every day. As you get up in the morning, you go to work, you want Hashem to accompany you? Would you? Well, come in the morning to the shul, and daven in the shul, and then take a week. Understand? And your whole day changes. Think of that. This was the most magnificent day of all time, because when God created the world, He brought into the world a reflection of Him. Everything in this world is Hashem. Every creation is a reflection of His will, what He wants, what He wanted. So, as the world developed, and all these things were created in creation, the one thing that was missing was not the creations of Hashem, they're all here, but Hashem Himself. All the creations of Hashem are here, including us. And we're reflections of Hashem too. We have to tell about a king. We're in the image of God. But Himself is not here. Bring it down. Bring it to this world. You see? And that's really what the Mishkan, what the sanctuary was all about. And that's why this day was a great day. Now, this was a great, wonderful, powerful, awesome day. And of course, it always remained for us, as we traveled through the desert for 40 years, and the job of the Kohanim, particularly the Leviim, the Levites, was to disassemble it when we were traveling, reassemble it when we got to a new place. Suppose we disassembled it and traveled, and we came to the place, and we stayed in the place only one day. We reassembled it for that one day, brought the sacrifices, whatever, and the very next day disassembled and traveled on. And we traveled for 40 years. We get there, it's Israel. It takes some time to conquer the land. There were enemy nations we have to destroy. But finally, as we take over the land, and we need to eventually build a permanent structure to take the place of this portable one. And that, of course, would be the Beit HaMikdash in Yerushalayim, which we built. It took us a couple of hundred years to get there with Shlomo HaMelech, who built this magnificent temple. It stood for 400 plus years. Sins that we committed caused its destruction, sent us into exile. It's a short exile, 70 years. We returned to Eretz Israel, built a second temple, a second Beit HaMikdash, and this second Beit HaMikdash did not have did not have all of the holiness of the first, but it had enough for it to be a place to bring the sacrifices. One thing became for sure: for as long as there was a Mishkan in which we traveled with, or what remained with us for some 200 years before the building of the Beit HaMikdash and permanence, so people could bring sacrifices anywhere. But the moment the Mishkan became obsolete, and we built the permanent structure in Jerusalem, then no longer can you bring sacrifices anywhere you please. Now, in those days, maybe a guy would feel in the mood for a sacrifice to God, he'd go out to the backyard, you understand? And he built himself a little altar, put an animal there, and brought a sacrifice. You can't do that no more. Because once it became permanent in Yerushalayim, so the Mishkan is no longer needed, but you can no longer bring your sacrifices anywhere. There's a central place now and a central authority called Yerushalayim. So if, God forbid, that Beit HaMikdash gets destroyed, which it did, then you can't bring any more sacrifices anywhere. And that's our situation today. Because after the second temple was built, the second one was destroyed some 400 years after that. And after that, we've been in exile for nearly 2,000. And we've lived a life of Jewishness in exile with the Torah, but without the sanctuary, without the Beit HaMikdash, without sacrifices. Some want to say that the divine presence, in a much less obvious way, accompanied us to the exile. For instance, in the first exile, we were only in exile 70 years in Babel, in Babylonia, and in Persia, Iran, Iraq. Everybody knows in Persia, we got into a little dangerous fix. Haman came after us, wanted to destroy us. Everybody knows that Hashem came to save us. Well, not everybody knows that. A lot of people think that Hashem wasn't the one who saved us. Many people read the book of the Megillah and they think that who's the real hero? Mordechai and Esther. You know why? Whose name is conspicuously absent from the Megillah story? Hashem. Why is it called Esther? Why is she called Esther? Because the word Esther means what? Hidden. That means Hashem was there, but in a very hidden way. It wasn't as grandiose as we're talking about right here. So again, we live in the exile in a very, limited access to Hashem, and you can hear Hashem's voices, but it's real soft, real quiet. It's not, I am the Lord your God. You're not going to hear that. You're going to hear it, but you're going to hear it softly, gently, because Hashem's divine presence is here, but not nearly as glorified as it was in the sanctuary on that day, or forever, or in the permanent Beis HaMikdash. But after the destruction of the second temple, 3 walls of the temple were destroyed. 1 wall remained. That wall we know as the western wall, the Kotel HaMaravi. Says the Medrash, Me'olam lo zaza shchina me'Kotel HaMaravi. Forever, the divine presence has never left the western wall. Isn't it amazing that the most irreligious people come to the western wall from all over the world and feel a sense of God and burst into tears? That means Hashem's presence is not only on certain occasions, but also in certain places, certain spots. That's what the western wall is all about. That's what Jerusalem is all about. So, the sense of God's presence is really the presence of the continuum of this to whatever minimal level. What is the minimum level of today? The Western Wall, Jerusalem, certain occasions, holidays, special personal occasions, weddings, brisses. These are things and situations which you can sense Hashem, though you can also sense Him every day on a personal level when you just pay attention and listen. Whenever you're faced with a decision to make and you're really not sure what's the right thing to do, talk to Him, He'll answer you. Softly, gently, but He will. This is the level of existence we have now in current times. Now I'm going to share with you something that's very, very difficult to understand. A frightening thing. But I think we need to learn. Let's turn the page. Page 592, 593, chapter 10. The sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, took a frying pan, put fire in them, placed incense upon it, and brought it before Hashem. But the Torah calls it an alien fire. What does the word alien mean? Foreign. What does foreign mean here? What do I mean by this? That had not been commanded them. That's why it's foreign. In other words, whatever we do what Hashem commands. If we do something that Hashem doesn't command, that's foreign. That's not what we're supposed to do. That means that not only are we sometimes commanded to stop neglecting what we're supposed to do, but we're also commanded not to add to what we're supposed to do. Everybody knows that you wear a pair of tzitzis, right? A 4-corner garment, you have to have 4 corners on it with the strings on each corner, right? Just as it's forbidden to have 3, it's equally forbidden to have 5. Everybody knows that in the tefillin, there are 4 compartments for 4 portions, 4 different little scrolls, with 1 compartment here on the arm for one big scroll, also again, four portions of the Torah. Just as it's forbidden to bring 3, or to put 3 in the tefillin, it's forbidden to put 5. Now you know on Sukkot, we wave 4 species: the palm branch, the citron fruit, the willows, and the myrtles, right? Just as it's forbidden to do 3, it's strictly forbidden to do 5. Do we all understand that? God wants you to do what He wants you to do. Don't try to outsmart God and become more religious than God and do more than what God wants. That's out of line. You want to ask?
One question.
Yeah.
Why on the beginning there is the hand one? On the box there is something like
I'll tell you later.
another plastic.
I'll tell you later. Okay, I'll tell you. I gotta finish this. Okay? That's a good question. But I'll tell you. I promise you. Trust me. Okay. So, these people, these 2 sons of Aaron brought what they shouldn't have brought. It was an incense, it was a spice, it was beautiful, it was part of the service. Well, it really wasn't part of the service because it wasn't asked for. But it seemed to enhance the service a little bit, you know? Sometimes when we pray on Shabbat in the synagogue, we take out, every Shabbat we take out the Torah. Then we take out the Torah we also take it out on Monday and Thursday, you know? Suppose they decide to take it out on Tuesday and Wednesday. That's wrong. Just as if you neglect it on Monday, you can't replace it on Tuesday. It's got to be the way Hashem wants it. So they did something that Hashem didn't want. That's an alien fire. That's a foreign fire. The Hebrew word for foreign, anybody want to try? Foreign. Alien. The Hebrew word, you know what? It's a bad translation. You know what the real word is? It means strange. Zar or muzar, right? What's a zar? A zar is a stranger, right? Huh? Or a foreigner, right? We call it Eish Zara. In fact, it could be, since the Eish was a fire that was used in the sacrifice, and the sacrifice is known as the service of Hashem, Avodat Hashem, it could be Avodah Zarah.
But it can be a different fire.
It could be a foreign fire. I mean, what's Avodah Zarah? What's Avodah Zarah mean? It means idol worship, right? Because you're worshiping a foreign God. What would be if you worship God and you worshiped Him and you meant it all to Hashem, but you did it in a different way than what Hashem wants? So that's not a munah zarah, it's not a foreign belief, but it's a foreign service. It's avodah zarah. What would be if I decided to worship God in a church or a mosque? So I'm still serving God, I'm still worshiping God. My faith is not different, but my service is. That's called idolatry. That's called avodah zarah. If you don't do it the way Hashem prescribes it, then you are doing a foreign service. That's what these guys did. Yeah.
But the exact translation for alien is chayzal.
Is that?
Chayzal.
Chayzal?
Chayzal.
Never heard the word. What is it?
Alien. Chayzar. Alien. The one that...
Never
So
heard
it's
the word.
like a different life form.
Okay, I mean, yeah, I don't, again, the original biblical Hebrew is the word zar. Zar means strange or foreign or someone else. Ish zar, a stranger came into town. Ish zar. To do a foreign worship is to do avodah zarah, to do it in a foreign manner. The point is, it's not an idol worship. It's not. I'm not worshiping idols. I be worshiping God. But if I'm doing it in the wrong way, that's avodah zarah. That's idolatry.
But my question is, if that translation holds, then could it be that the alien fire actually brought in a spiritual thing that he didn't want?
For sure. For sure. And what's the consequence?
What?
Well, let's take a look. The consequence.
Rabbi, I'm just confused for a second. You're
That's
saying
all,
that.
just for a second.
Yeah. You're saying that the alien,
I'm confused for the whole of my life.
the word alien here is improper, it should be strange, that the Hebrew word used,
Right, it would
the
be
Hebrew
better
word
to say
used
strange.
here means strange.
Yeah, it's
not-
strange to the better
Okay.
translation. Strange to the
Okay.
better, right. So it says in the Torah, fire came forth from Hashem. It's another fire, by the way, folks. Remember that fire that came down and consumed the item, consumed the animal? This fire consumed them, and they died. So, do we understand the gravity of the crime? Do we understand the gravity of the punishment? What's the crime? The crime is that they worshipped improperly. It's not that they worshipped a foreign god. They were doing this for Hashem. But they did it in an improper way. And that deserves death. That's how we understand it. When God says, I am the Lord your God, you shall have no other gods, no other, it means you shall have no other ways to worship me but the way that I want. That's what it means. Because it's the worship that matters. How many times have we emphasized the point that your thoughts can be totally for Hashem, but if your service is incorrect, it messes things up. For instance, everybody knows that you're not allowed to bow in front of an idol. What would be if I bowed in front of the idol, but I was thinking of Hashem the whole time? Just as bad. Doesn't help. Young man who's not aware of the Christian holidays goes out on December 24th to buy a little plant for his wife because it's Friday, it's Erev Shabbos. And he comes home with, believe it or not, an Xmas tree.
Oh, no.
Honey, here's a plant. It's for Shabbos. You understand we got a problem here? You see that? Okay, I'm walking down the street and I pass this church and $50 falls out of my pocket. $50. No, $100 falls out of my pocket. Can I bend down and pick up that $100?
Yeah.
No! You may want to pick it up, but you can't. It's forbidden. So I came up with a personal solution on how to do it. Look at the church, show them the best, and pick up $100. That's the way to do it. But otherwise, you can't bend it. You can't bow in front of it. You really can't. So we have to understand that doing something improper in the service of Hashem is just as bad as worshiping a foreign God. Do we all understand that? Okay. This being the case, the punishment is death. Okay, it's a serious gravity, a grave crime. The crime, the punishment is death. Do we understand how this is affecting the events of the day? This is a celebration, folks. This is a joyous occasion, a simcha.
So you say that the punishment is so extreme because it's such an important day?
Maybe that's true. Maybe you're right. Maybe you're right that in fact.
Because I'm sure it's not the first time.
Right. So, but it's such a grave crime because of the beauty of the day and the spirituality of the day, and they ruined the day that they deserve the punishment. But it certainly ruined the day. Look further. Moshe said to Aaron, I will be sanctified to those who are nearest to me. Thus I will be honored for the entire people. And Aaron was silent. What is Moshe telling Aaron? Was Aaron telling Moshe? This is the most telltale moment of all of history. Well, Aaron's not saying anything. Aaron's silent. What does Aaron's silence tell us in terms of volumes? Volumes of silence. Furthermore, what is Moshe telling Aaron? Why is Moshe talking to Aaron altogether? Who's Aaron in the story? Come on, folks.
He's the high priest.
Who is?
He's the high priest. He's a mourning father.
He's a father.
He's the father. He's mourning. He's in terrible, terrible pain and tragedy. He's lost 2 sons. Maybe he understands why. But it doesn't mitigate his sadness. So what is Moshe telling him? What is Moshe trying to tell him? Let's try that one. What do you think Moshe came over to bother to talk to him in the first place for? No.
Hire you more.
Wouldn't you try to comfort someone? Try to comfort him. I mean, the day's marred as is. Comfort the man. The man has just performed this magnificent service, brought the divine presence down, and everything's so beautiful, so wonderful. Great simcha, great joy. If you see the fire of God consuming the animal, okay, the day's ruined, I guess. But at the same time, the day's ruined. Moshe feels the need to attend to his brother. Maybe Moshe's a rabbi, feels he needs to attend to the sadness of the people that need his help at the time. But there's no doubt that the reason for Moshe's statement here is to comfort him. See, when you're learning this on your own, you have to understand, you just can't read it. But you got to understand behind it, what's behind all this? What are we reading here? Why is Moshe talking to him? Who's him? What's he going through? What's Moshe trying to accomplish by this? No doubt, Aaron is suffering tragedy. No doubt Moshe is trying to comfort him. Before we get to the comfort, let's go to the end. What is Aaron's response? What's Aaron's response?
Silence.
Silence. What's silence mean? A, acceptance. B, somehow or another, Moshe's words did comfort him.
Could it also just be shock?
It could be, but I don't think that conveys that. I don't think the Torah would convey that message because, that's obvious. There's no need for the Torah to tell me that. If he's shocked, he's shocked, okay. But to tell me that he's silent is as if to say, you might have thought that he would have responded, that he would have been upset or angry and screaming and yelling and running and having a tantrum. No, he's silent. So the Torah is trying to tell you that there's acceptance on his part. We would imagine that this is heroic, wouldn't we? This is heroic. Can you handle something like this? Chas v'shalom. This is heroic. Aaron is heroic here. Okay. So, in the sense of his heroism, let's go back and see what Moshe said as a comfort. And tell me if you can figure out what this comfort is. Tell me what Aaron heard. Moshe tells him, let me tell you, this is what Hashem has been telling us all along. Of this did Hashem speak. This is what Hashem is telling us all along. I will be sanctified through those who are nearest to me. Thus I will be honored before the entire people. What does this mean? You want to try it? You want to go for it? You have an inkling? You have an idea?
Something to the effect of,
Go on.
yes, what they did was wrong, and their punishment, while it's horrifying in this moment, you and your sons are nearest me, and thus what I just did, even though it was punishment and harsh, honors everyone else here because
How's it honor?
because it's truth. It shows that
So you're saying very powerful. You're saying very, very powerful, very beautiful.
but it's a little off.
No, it's not a little off, not at all. It's just missing a point.
Okay.
But what you're saying is, let's recap. What Jess is saying is basically that Aaron, that Moshe is telling him, you and your children are the closest to Hashem. You're his servant, you're his Kohen. You're working you're his priest, you're working in the temple, and he loves you. A strange way to show your love. Right? I mean, why is Aaron silent to this? But he says in addition to the point. In addition to the point of saying that these are the closest to me, he says the point of I will be honored by the people because of this. Now that I'm not understanding completely from what you're saying. How do the people get how does Hashem, it says I will be honored, how does Hashem get honored before the entire people through this?
Because, like you say, there's no punishment, but there are consequences.
All right, so in other words, the honor that's due to Hashem is the honor of your God. There's no greater honor than recognizing who He is. The greatest honor you can give to God is to say, you're the boss. That's the greatest honor you can do. Tell the truth, you're the boss. That's what He wants to hear. He wants to hear that, that you're the boss and that your will shall be done. And when right is right, wrong is wrong. And when something happens that is a consequence to an action, we need to learn from it that this is God's will. Meaning basically this: if God forbid a person were to cross the street against the red light and get hit by a car, chas v'shalom, right? Hashem would say, people would say, that's the reality of life.
No.
He didn't use his head. If the person were to stick his finger in fire and get burned, we would say, that's a good lesson to learn. Now, I could teach you that lesson without the event, but if you saw the event, that would make an everlasting impact on you forever. You'd never forget it. If you saw, God forbid, a guy get hit by a car, you would never forget that for the rest of your life. I could give you 10 speeches on it, wouldn't make the same impact. But you saw it. Do you get it? Says Hashem, the message that I'm Hashem, and that there are consequences to wrongdoing, is a message that I just conveyed to the people. And the people will never forget it in their lives. And just as the people experienced the Shekhinah, and the joy of the opening day, and the fire coming down to consume the animal, they experienced this too, to remember that Hashem's presence is here always, to love you, to protect you, to care for you, and to give you the consequence if you fail. The world needs the kind of structure. America needs the kind of structure. We as a people need the kind of structure that says right is rewarded and wrong is punished. If we don't have this, we have no faith in anything. We can't trust anything in this world. Do you understand? The world becomes nuts. People ask the question, why is there so much violence in America? Every other day, every 3 months, there's another school shooting. One of 19 kids go down the tubes. What's going on? What's going on is we're not giving the capital punishment. What's going on is we're not executing. If we did, this guy would think twice. We'd save 19 lives. Point is that the world has to know this. The world has to know there's a God in the world, a beautiful God who loves us, who brings his fire to the ceremony, and we can sing and dance with the ceremony, but we also have to fall on our face and fear wrongdoing. Murder shall be punished properly. You did a wrongdoing here. Get it? So this is how Hashem is on it. But he says something deeper than this. This is the extra point that I wanted to bring out, Jess. That he's saying this, that they did something wrong, they need to be punished, the people need to see it, and they will therefore honor me as proper. And it's done with the people that are closest to me. Do you hear that? It's done to the greatest rabbis, the greatest Kohanim. People often ask, how come great rabbis suffered in terrible situations, of great moments of terror, of great moments of oppression and executions, and how many rabbis were killed in the Holocaust? And we're saying here that this is how Hashem will be honored. This is a tough thing to say. It's a scary thing to say. But we have to internalize it. We have to understand what Hashem's telling us. And that our greats are judged greater than we are. Hagadol mechavero yitzro gadol mimenu. He who was greater has a greater temptation to sin. He who was greater is held to greater accounts. And he who was greater will be punished harder. Because he's more responsible and he knows better. So when we see two great Kohanim, two great people, the sons of Aaron, two great men, do a mistake like this, the punishment is severe, not only because it meets the crime, but also because it's for the people to be aware that nobody is exempt from the law. Now, you know, in government, particularly in Israel, there's one scandal after the next. This guy stole that, the prime minister did that, and they're after everybody's tail. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong, but the point is that how can you have a man who's a president of the United States and be accused of infidelity to his wife all over the place with all these women? Now, everybody does it. Yeah, but he's the president of the United States. You understand? And he should have no better. He's a role model for the people. Whether it's the Prime Minister of Israel, or the President of the United States, or a great rabbi, whomever. People must be held accountable. And this is where you understand Hashem's truth. And this is why Hashem's name will be sanctified and holy and revered by the people. People will come to learn that the law is the law and there's no exemption to it. And right is right, wrong is wrong. Oftentimes, I will admit that a great rabbi or rabbis will be, let's say, harmed and maybe punished and suffer through no sins of their own at all, because they bear the sins of the rest of us. And all the wrongdoing that we do and the punishment that we deserve, they shoulder for us. So that we understand how much honor and reverence we have to have for these great rabbis. So let's understand that these two men, despite their wrongdoing, are close to me, says Hashem. I still love them. And they will have an eternal share close to me in the world to come. Aaron, can you be comforted now? Can you be comforted with the fact that your sons will be, in fact, loved by me for eternity in the world to come? Aaron is silent. It means to me, he's comforted. You know, as a rabbi, I can tell you personally, I go to maybe 100, between Shiva houses and funerals, 100 a year, maybe 80. It's part of the job. And I'm always, every time I go, I'm always challenged and frightened. I want to say the right words. People are in suffering or in need. I gotta say something right. Come on, Hashem, give me the right words to say. So sometimes you say the right words and you feel it and you feel good that thank God you brought some comfort to people. Sometimes you can say something stupid. And that doesn't help a lot at all. And I've done that too. I've done that too. You know, it's called on the job training, experience. It teaches you a lot. The fact of the matter is that Moshe did a good job. Because Aaron was receptive to the message. Aaron was, okay, I got your point. Yeah, I feel sad I lost my two sons. But they accomplished something for the Jewish people. And they accomplished something for Hashem. My sons did not die in vain. A soldier that loses his life in the service of Eretz Yisrael did not die in vain. He didn't fight on the Golan Heights, you understand, and give his life so that we should give those Golan Heights back. That would have meant he died in vain. Chas v'shalom. No, he didn't die in vain. He died for a purpose and a meaning. And his family goes to the kever, goes to the cemetery every year at his yard site the day he fell in battle. And they feel the sadness, the loss, the tragedy. They feel it had a purpose. It was a meaningful life. It was a life that lived only till 23. But he died serving his country, serving his people, serving his God. He lived a good life. Then there's a guy that dies at 83 and did nothing. So sometimes the numbers don't mean a thing at all. You see? But the point is that Moshe's telling Aaron, his sons lived a purposeful life. They're loved by God. And that was the key that Jess brought out a moment ago, that these are still loved by Hashem. That's important to remember, despite the punishment. And even, let's say, let's say one day you stub your toe and you get a punishment, or you got a toothache or whatever. It's a punishment, Hashem, right? And guess what? Hashem loves you. You get it? Even when you get a punishment, he loves you. You gotta feel that. Can you feel it? So Moshe's telling that to Aaron. Moshe's telling Aaron, even when you're suffering, Hashem loves you. Hashem's caring for you. He'll take care of the situation, don't worry. He'll take care of your sons in heaven. Now, the truth is that this is something that we have to try and understand in terms of the Holocaust. And I've never been successful in being able to do it that well, to be honest, because it's such an overwhelming tragedy. But without the Holocaust, there'd be no Israel. There's no question. And I guess that was the price we paid. Every single one of those 6 million is a kadosh, is a holy martyr, that his holy soul rests right next to God, next to the holy throne in heaven. No doubt about it. Like every soldier is up there in heaven next to Hashem on the Kisei HaKavod. No doubt about it. So that being the case, there is some meaning, there is some purpose. There's some understanding. Is it complete? No, it's not. Do we truly understand it? Maybe we do. Maybe it's hard to internalize. We struggle with it. But this is the message. What do we need to do with this message? We need to work on it. We need to internalize it. We need to really understand it. We need to really accept it. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of emotional work. It takes a lot of spiritual work. And that's what we're challenged with. That's our goal. So this is the thing I was a little frightened to share with you, but I'm sharing it with you because I think you need to know it. I think this is an essential part of our faith, an essential part of the message that Torah teaches us. How to deal with tragedy, adversity, how to deal with sadness and our own personal challenges of the day, which are a whole lot smaller, obviously. But nevertheless, they are serious. We go through our own difficulties. We go through our own challenges, and they're tough, and they're not easy. But understand that Hashem loves us and rewards right. And we make a mistake, we have to pay for it. That's a fact. But nevertheless, Hashem loves us. There's still hope, and there's still opportunity, and that's essential underpinnings of our faith. Last message of the day, of the evening. A little levity to end on the right note. Anyone tell me the name of the Parsha of last week? What do you want to say? South, wrong. Shemini's this week. And Jess wants to say Tzav. It's last week. And Jess is wrong. Why?
Oh, because of Pesach.
Oh, because of Pesach. Okay. So, what was the Shabbos before that? What Parsha was there? Also Pesach. Who said that? You said it? Okay. So it's okay. So that's now. Let's go back 3 weeks to Tzav. We've had a little intermission there, haven't we? We haven't had a Parsha class for 3 weeks. That's what we're going to say, right? Okay. I've been on YouTube for 3 weeks. You're missing me already. Okay. So let's figure this out. 3 weeks ago, Parsha Tzav in the morning. What did we read in the afternoon to Mincha? Shemini, right? That's one time we read Shemini. Then the following week, well, you know what I'm doing? Don't tell anybody. Don't steal my lines. The following week, we read Shemini again on Monday. And we read Shemini again on Thursday. The following week was, of course, Shabbat Pesach. So we didn't read Shemini, except in the afternoon we read Shemini again. Because every Shabbat to Mincha, you read the next Parsha. Right? That's 4 times. The following week was Chol HaMoed. And the last Shabbat of Pesach, once again we read Pesach, but we read Shemini in the afternoon to Mincha. Then we read Shemini again this past Monday. Then we read Shemini again this past Thursday, this morning. And we'll read Shemini again this Shabbos. How many times we're reading Shemini?
8.
Ha ha ha. Rebbe's in Shemini. The only parsha in the entire Torah that can ever be read as much as 8 times is Parsha Shemini. And only when Pesach comes out on Shabbat, which it did this year. So it had 2 Shabbats to Pesach. In that situation, as I showed you, you end up reading Shemini 8 times. Is there a remez or a hint to all of this? Obviously there is. There's a hint to everything in the Torah. Shemini, 8 times. Anyway, that's it. Share with you this wonderful parsha. Have a wonderful Shabbat, everyone. Sunday at 10:30. Don't be late.